Hi, I'm Pete from Leathergoth Studio, and today what I want to do is I want to take an old breathing mask for spray painting that's broken and restore it by rebuilding it out of leather. So I'm going to go through the process of how I'm going to make the pattern and which parts I can recover from this and what the parts do, and if any parts need repairing that I can repair, I'll show you how I repair them. So to begin with, I'm going to dismantle the old mask and see which parts can be recovered from it and see if I have enough parts to build the new breathing mask. I'll do it a bit steampunky. Once I've actually made the, well, actually more Mad Max than steampunk, once I've actually found out which parts I can use, I'm going to work out how to make a pattern. And once I've made the pattern, once I've built a pattern for it, I'll go through the process of stitching up the pattern, sealing it, fitting the components, and hopefully I should have a relatively decent mask. So first step is dismantling. This mask is silicone mold with a valve for breathing out, which closes when you breathe in, and then when you breathe in, the filters are used. Now the filters also have a valve so that you can only breathe in through the filters and you can't breathe out through the filters. So I'm going to dismantle it. Well, I'm going to take, it's already dismantled, but I'm going to take the parts out and explain what each part is. This is a one-way valve. This is my breathing out valve. So if I have it in front of me, breathing out, possible, breathing in, not possible. It's got a good seal inside it. This component's good. That's from the front of the mask. So that sits inside there in the mask. Next components is the filter cartridges. These are standard filter cartridges. It's a two-part cartridge. One part's basically made out of different layers, different thicknesses of material to take out the large particles. And then this is, I believe this is an activated carbon filter. However, you can buy these filters at different grades, and if you are going to build one of these, I try and get the highest grade. So the first step is dismantling the mask. So I've taken the front valve off, I've taken one of the filters off, and now I'm going to take the other filter off, which is actually very simple. It has a little plastic washer on the inside. It's got a very, very rough thread on it, so it can easily be removed, and they're designed to be easily removed because as long as you can, if you're using this as self-protection, you want to be able to take the filter off, put a new filter on without any hassles. And this is the fastening which holds it on the inside. So the first step is I'm going to make out of paper tape a mold of this so I can work out what a flat pattern will be. And what I want to do is I want to minimize the amount of seams for the different sections, because anytime I do a seam, that's an opportunity for unfiltered air to come in, and so it's something that I'll have to work out how to seal up. So the less seams I have, the better. But making the pattern is actually relatively easy. I'll move back some of the pieces, and this goes for all patterns of three-dimensional structures that you're making from leather. If you have a 3D structure, this is a good way of building a pattern. That could be anything: face, a flask for keeping whiskey in, a whole body to build a custom fit leather armor. But the first stage is to make sure that your mold is protected from the tape. You don't want to put the tape on the mold, and then when you remove it, you don't want the tape all tearing. And so the first thing I'm going to do is lay some cling film down over the mask, and then I'm going to make a tape pattern over it. So make sure I have plenty enough cling film, and I should get a knife out to cut the cling film, but you know what, it cuts with just, it tears quite neatly. So I'm wrapping the original piece as smoothly as I can in cling film. It doesn't really matter, this is just to keep the tape off the component. So next thing, I'm going to use standard painter's masking tape, and I have a feeling that I know how this is going to go because of the shape. If I can put tape all around the edge and then tape across the top, and then cut round the front piece and put a cut on the top, then I should be able to get a one-piece pattern if I'm lucky. But as I said, it's a very simple process. And when I'm making the design, I may be simplifying it as much as I can. When I'm making the pattern to cover the whole of it, I'm not worried just now about the holes for fitting the components. I'm just trying to work out what shape a piece of leather I can use to do this. You can see it's a relatively quick process. Here's some tape, put some tape on, press it down, repeat, rinse, repeat, cycle. Now, once I've made my basic paper pattern, I'm actually going to scan it into the computer, and then I will make a clean pattern from that. I'll draw a clean pattern from that, which is symmetrical, just to make it nice and neat and tidy. Okay, so that's the first step. Now I'm going to look at the shape, and I'm going to try and work out the least number of seams. There's basically a loop which goes around there, so it's basically a cone with the top cut off. So to make the cone, I think I'll go for a wrap all the way around and then seam one edge. And then I'll make a separate piece for the front section. I may even leave it joined on here, but for aesthetics I might just make it as a separate piece. So I think that's what I'm going to go for. So here's my thought pen, where I think I'm going to have to seam. Definitely going to have to seam down the nose, or here, but this section looks like less stitching than either here, here, or down the centre, here. So because it looks like less stitching means less seams that I'm going to have to seal up. Now this front section, since I can't mould all the way around it, this front section is going to have to be separate, but I may leave it joined on one edge. So this is the one edge I may leave joined together. I'll see how the pattern lays out when I do the pattern. So I'm just going to draw that with a dotted line to remind me, don't cut this until you discover it's going to be a lot easier to cut it, then cut it. I'm going to start cutting this out. So I'll remove the pattern off the base. I'm going to roughly mark in which side do I want the respirator on. I'll put the respirator on this side. And valve on this side. I'll measure the size of the holes that I need to use for those after I've made the pattern. So I'm going to remove this, cut the pattern off, see how it lays down, see how much leather it'll waste. So that will be the next step. Okay, so I'm just taking the original piece out of the pattern. Now, this is going to be my new ventilator. I suppose I could actually start out with something like this and use like a paper mache or something, or foam or some other material. But as I said, I'm going to do this in leather. So I'm going to cut off any of the bits which are not necessary. And I'll follow that edge line which I put in. It won't be perfect, but once I've finished, and I have a symmetrical, basic symmetrical pattern. Once I've scanned it in, I can draw only half of it and mirror that half and get a nice neat pattern. Now, if I'm making a molded piece like the sporrans I build, I'd make a form and mold those over the form so that we wouldn't have seams in it. But I want this to be quite a quick project, and this is going through the whole design process and build, and I'm hoping that it won't take too long. Let's see the pattern. I also have to decide whether, when I put it together, am I going to butt the pieces of leather together or am I going to have an overlap on them? If I have an overlap, this section will have to have, or this section will have to have a bit more leather on it. Now I'm following this as accurately as I can, but when I put it down, it's not going to be symmetrical. But as I said, I'll scan that in and make it symmetrical. So I've taken the 3D shape and I've made close to a flat shape. It's not perfect. It's perfect on one side, the other side's not perfect. But I think that's pretty good. So, I do like this pattern. It looks like it's going to be a very simple pattern. I may, when I'm cutting the leather out, these pieces, I might use these pieces to cut out internal washers to strengthen the pieces where the filters plug in or where the valve plugs in. But I'm really pleased with that pattern. That's a very simple pattern. So I'll scan that in, and once I've scanned it in, I might make a paper cut of it, tape it up, measure it against my face, see if it's still right, and if it's not, make modifications. But yes, very happy with that. It's not exactly the pattern I thought it'd come out as, which means that if I'd been imagining what the pattern was and designing it and then building it and then thinking this doesn't fit, this already fits. So after a while designing the pattern, I've now got a pattern made up. I've cut it out on the laser. So here's the first look at it cut out on the laser. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to go and soak it in water to make it soft so I can mould the damn thing and clean up any burn marks which are left on it. Then I'll stitch it up, and then we will have, once the fittings are put in, then we will have a lovely new mask. Now the mask's all cleaned up, so I'm ready to stitch it. So the edges will go together nicely. It'll come out into hopefully a nice shape, and put the fittings in and then put some straps on it to hold it into place. If I make another one of these, I'll push the logo up a little higher because I think it looked nicer higher. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch it together. The first stitch I'm going to do is going to be through several times to lock it off, and after I've done that, then I'll just continue with a simple loop stitch. So I'm leaving a bit of thread left over at the end. I don't want that to pull out. I'm sorry, you can't see my half-assed stitching here. Which would be nice if you could, because when you're doing leather work, it's about patience and it's about paying attention to what you're doing. There is a certain amount of skill in not doing exactly what I've done. So let's take that stitch back through. What I did there was I crossed over the thread. Because of that, it would have given me a strange stitch at the start. All about patience. Don't mess it up. Spend a lot of time doing the design on it, and then you ruin it with some bad stitching. It's not a good idea. And I want these stitches to pull together very hard. I wish you could see clearly. If I had a cameraman, then you would be able to see a lot clearer. But I'm going to put a few stitches through on the start to lock my thread off. And because I'm doing a very simple loop stitch, I'm going to leave the stitches so they're horizontal on the back and cross over behind it, just out of aesthetics. It makes no difference whatsoever for how strong it's going to be. Well, after quite a while, that's the stitching finished on it. Now it's to put the filter on and the one-way valve. The one-way valve is going to be difficult because I found out it doesn't actually come apart. It's been melted into place there by the looks of it. Nope, that's not melted into place. There is a way it comes apart. I'll try and push it through first, and then I'll see if I can't do that. I'll see how I'm gonna dismantle it. I'd like to say that was really difficult to fit, but it just plugged in. The size of hole that I made was slightly bigger than the inside hole, and because it was slightly bigger than the inside diameter, the diameter of the groove, it gave me just enough space to put it in, and it's absolutely and utterly perfect fit. It's beautiful. Next part would be to fix one of the filters onto it, and that's going to be so easy. Let's just press through. So fundamentally, that's the mask design done. To seal the holes, I'm going to use some thick latex. Just pour it along the seams. And when the latex dries, it is a rubber, and it should make a completely airtight seal. And also it has a benefit that it will hold the stitching in place. This is a silicone brush, and silicone brushes are brilliant because nothing sticks to silicone except for more silicone. And so normally if I was using a normal paintbrush to paint this latex on, the paintbrush would be ruined. It would be a disposable commodity. But all I have to do is wait until this dries, and because it has such a smooth surface on the silicone, the latex will just peel straight off. I don't want to take out the exhaust valve, the exhale valve, because it was okay to put in, but I'm sure it'll stretch the leather if I remove it. On a dusk mask, a breathing mask, like the one that this is based on, the cartridges are replaced because the cartridges are things which take the dirt out, they're pollutants. Whereas this one, the exhaust valve, literally just lets the air out. It's got no filtering in it, and so it can be cleaned. Whereas the filters, when they get clogged, they're clogged. God, this is so satisfying. Can't think of a project which I've enjoyed quite so much recently as this one. So there's the silicone on the inside. Hopefully it's not come through too much on the outside, but when I dye the outside black, we'll not be able to see it. I could, after I've dyed it, I could actually just force some silicone into the holes in the front. When I'm saying silicone, I do mean latex. Once I've dyed it, then I could wipe some silicone over it and fill in the holes from the front. But with the amount of silicone of latex I've got on the inside, when that sets, that should be plenty strong enough to stop me getting any air coming through from the outside. Okay, back in a bit. After dyeing and polishing, there's a basic finished piece. Haven't decided what straps I'm going to put on it. It might be incorporated into a bigger mask, and I might wrap the actual filter itself in leather as well, but I'll have to decide on that. I'll decide on that later. At least this way I can see what kind of filter it's got in, and breathe safe, stay safe. Thanks.